I am dreading the White Sox taking on the Royals this weekend, although maybe I should be hopeful. Let's discuss on today's episode of Locked On White Sox.
You are Locked On White Sox, your daily Chicago White Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, I'm your host, Todd Welter, a lifelong Sox fan and contributor for SouthsideShowdown.com, part of the Fansided Network, and also I've covered Major League Baseball for outlets such as the Associated Press. And thanks for making Locked On White Sox your first listen every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Make sure to hit the like button on today's episode. Subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox if you've not done so already. Additionally, follow or subscribe to the show at wherever you get your podcasts. The White Sox take on the Royals in Kansas City, and I'll discuss why you should dread seeing Chicago play at Kauffman this weekend, but maybe have some hope. Then let's discuss how glad I am that manager Will Venable is embracing having both Teel and Edgar Carroll in the lineup at the same time. And finally, I want to discuss where Bleacher Report's Joel Reuter ranked Grant Taylor among the league's closers. This episode is brought to you by 5 Hour Energy Transfusion. Enter for a chance to win a dream golf trip for two to any golf tournament in the U.S. Visit 5hewin.com for full rules and entry. No purchase necessary. Excludes the Masters tournament. Ends October 31st, 2025. All right, so last week I did a show where I was excited for the White Sox to play in Seattle. I mean, the team was on a heater. I wanted to see how the Sox stacked up with a playoff contender. And I turned out to be a lot wrong. I mean, I should not have had that excitement because you got to remember, the White Sox are still bad after all. I mean, they're fun to watch sometimes, and there's some hope, but they're still bad. They're still like the worst team in the American League bad. And this team is especially bad in Kansas City. I mean, Kauffman Stadium is a house of horrors for the White Sox. The White Sox last won in Kansas City on September 6, 2023. And if I'm reading things correctly, they last won a series in Kansas in May of 2022. And Kansas City, Missouri, for those scoring at home. Otherwise, the White Sox have just been plain awful at Kauffman Stadium since that series. I mean, they have not, I think they've won like 2 games. They've not won there since, like I said, 2023. I mean, and even in 2023, I think they only won 2 games there. And while I get, awful's been synonymous with the White Sox, they are truly, truly awful when they play in Kansas. But things could be different. I doubt it, but they could. And then, there's a couple reasons to have some hope. But there are a couple of reasons to dread this series. I mean, first, embarrassing losses happen there. Like the ball bouncing off of Chase Maedraw's head that ended up blowing a 3-2 lead this season. You guys remember that one? Happened early May. All Chase Maedra has to do is catch the ball. Instead, it bounces off his head, and it's like, oh my gosh, the White Sox just White Soxed. And the 2024 White Sox are still in there sometimes. Or like one of the worst losses this season happened in Kansas City when they lost 10-0 this year and were barely competitive. They weren't even competitive. And I believe that was the game where Andrew Vaughn dashed for home when when it wasn't even supposed to be a contact play. And the other reason why I'm dreading this a little bit is you got the Reds clinging to their slim playoff hopes. You don't think for a second that they don't got the series circled as a way to get back into the playoff race. I believe they're 4.5 back as I'm recording this. And I think they're a game under 500. And then there's Bobby Witt Jr. He has a .433 batting average with a 1.185 OPS against the White Sox this season. Again, a 1.185 OPS against the White Sox. Not only would that be one of the best OPSs in baseball, but that would be the best OPS for the White Sox by a country mile. And that's just what he's doing against the White Sox. And he has an .865 OPS over the past 7 days. So he is definitely on a heater. And then you got rookie Noah Cameron going tonight for the Royals on the mound, and he is on a roll. And we've seen the White Sox struggle against rookie pitchers. And it's just like, man, this is going to be a tough one. This is going to be a rough weekend I have a feeling. It's just in my gut. It's in my bones. And one of the reasons too is Kansas City, is built perfectly for Kauffman. How the roster is constructed, and that's another reason why it's like, man, why can't the White Sox build a roster to their ballpark that they play 81 games in? It's not a power park. Kauffman, isn't really this home run heavy park. It's more of a contact pitching and defense park. And the Royals have been that the past 2 seasons. They've been built to fit that. And it also helps that they have a superstar. And Salvador Perez is still productive. Now, they are a bit banged up, so that's another reason to be hopeful that things may be a little bit different this go around than it was in May. They've got some injuries in their rotation. And if you do look at their injury report, there's some concerns for them. And also, the White Sox are going to come in to Kansas City now with Colson Montgomery and Kyle Teel, because they weren't in the lineup the last time the White Sox were in Kansas City. And I'll get to manager Will Venable's changing his stance in the next segment about having Teel and Carroll in the lineup together. But the White Sox are at least rocking better bats. Well, I'll say this. They're rocking more promising bats, and they are rocking some guys that are actually now hitting better. I mean, Lenyn Sosa was hitting 248 at the time of the last series in Kansas City. And you also don't have Nick Maton and Joshua Palacios on the roster either. And Andrew Vaughn and his struggles at the time, that's not in the lineup either. Now, obviously, you would want what Andrew Vaughn is doing in Milwaukee right now with the White Sox. But again, I don't think that was ever going to happen. And I think we kind of just, again, I'm going to go back to it because I saw somebody put in the comments about how, like, at the time I recorded Vaughn being traded, that, this is looking like a terrible take. Give it some time. And if he does thrive in Milwaukee, awesome. Good for him. Change of scenery. There's nothing, sometimes guys just need change of sceneries, even if you're on the best organizations. But just remember, he was always hot in June. So this, again, could be just things pushed back. I'm going to wait till the end of September before I declare, oh my gosh, it's the worst thing that the White Sox were without Andrew Vaughn. Because remember, he did end up costing the White Sox in the series in Kansas City with some of his base running gaffes. Also, Luis Robert Jr., he is hitting much better. So maybe things do go a little bit better. And then in terms of the bullpen, you do got Grant Taylor's stuff now. So maybe they can get a pitcher who can maybe help get them a save in Kansas. So while, again, it's been just a house of horrors for the White Sox, maybe this thing could be different. Because during this recent stretch of at least playing better baseball, I know they're losing again, but they have played a little bit better. Maybe they can defy the odds and at least win a game in Kansas. But it's just, I got a feeling Bobby Witt Jr. is just going to blow them up. Well, what I no longer need to be concerned about is Will Venable being resisting to having Edgar, Carroll, and Kyle Teal in the lineup together. And I want to discuss the manager changing his tune after the break. Time to fuel up and turn it up with 5-Hour Energy Transfusion. This grape, ginger, and lime flavored shot brings the iconic taste of a golf course favorite to a non-alcoholic boost. Perfect for sinking birdies and making great memories with friends. It's a hole-in-one on your energy game. Whether you're out on the course or just need a little extra push to power through your day, 5-Hour Energy Transfusion delivers the clubhouse flavor you love without ever leaving the green. And I know I could have used a 5-Hour Energy Transfusion back in the day when my buddy and I, we thought we were getting this great deal to walk 18 holes. We thought, hey, we're teenagers. We can hoof it and carry our bags. Wrong. It was a long course, and man, I was dragging at the end. And golf is all about good times with good people and good flavors. The grape ginger lime flavor of 5-Hour Energy Transfusion gives you the best parts of your clubhouse go-to without leaving the course or chasing down that bev cart. And now you can amp up the fun even more. Just buy, snap, and enter for a chance to win a dream golf trip to any golf tournament in the U.S. Tee up that trip. Visit 5hewin.com for full rules and entry. No purchase necessary. Excludes the Masters tournament. Ends October 31st, 2025. Welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Again, make sure to hit the like button on today's episode and subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox if you've not done so already. And if you can't catch the show on YouTube, Locked On White Sox is available on all major podcast platforms. So make sure to follow or subscribe on places such as Apple or Spotify. Either way, get your 30-minute fix of Chicago White Sox baseball venting with me. As you can tell, still in the temporary location for recording. Hopefully by next Wednesday, I'll be back in my recording studio. So hopefully we will be, in a better where my White Sox stuff is and all that stuff. Well, thankfully, Will Venable has changed his stance on having both catchers Edgar, Carroll, and Carroll and Teal in the lineup together with one catching and one DHing. I mean, obviously, this is something a lot of fans have been pining for. It's something that I've been pining for. I know there's risks because if you pinch run, whoever's catching, then you lose the DH spot since you're moving the other to catcher. There's also the potential for injury. I get it, but I believe it's worth the risk because you need those two talented bats in the lineup as much as possible. Not just for production, but Teel and Quero need as many at-bats in the major leagues, especially now as the season wraps up, to keep their development going. And Will Venable, he now sees the light. Although a potential problem with having both in the lineup is going to eventually loom, that's going to prevent it maybe happening a lot once Chase Mydroth comes off the IL. But here's what Venable said back in late July, and then I want to share what he's recently said. So this is from Sports Illustrated's Jack Ankeny. This is what Venable said when he was resistant to having Carroll and Teal in the lineup. Quote, "It's a possibility," manager Will Venable said Saturday. "We've done it a couple times early with the DH. With where our roster's at, it's not a necessity, but to your point, there is value to getting these guys consistent at bats. They're in an okay spot. Obviously, the catcher spot takes a lot out of you, and as they're navigating their first major league season, I don't think it's the worst thing to have two guys who are capable of having a good portion of at-bats. We might see that from time to time, but right now, I think they're doing a great job," end quote. So meaning he just thought there was enough at-bats with them just splitting time at catcher. Basically, if they play, one guy plays 4, one guy plays 3 a day or a week, that type of stuff. But fast forward to today, well, it was shared yesterday. This is what Kyle Williams from the Sun-Times shared. White Sox manager Will Venable still isn't quite comfortable with playing both catchers Edgar, Quero, and Carroll Teal in the lineup, but he understands the necessity. Quote, "We need these guys in the lineup. They're two of our best hitters. They continue to perform out there. It's hard not to have them in the lineup. So for me, it's worth the risk and something that we have to be comfortable with doing because I think it helps us give us the best chance to win," end quote. The risk lies in the fact that if Carroll and Teal gets injured and one has to shift from designated hitter spot to catcher, then the White Sox would forfeit the DH spot in its lineup. But if the Sox don't have one of the two in the lineup, it shortens a lineup that, despite some encouraging flashes in the second half, has ranked near the bottom of the league in most statistical categories. So that's why you got to take the risk. And also, again, it's for the development. You want to get these guys now towards the end of the season as many at-bats as possible. Now, maybe you do have to sit Teel when you're facing a lefty because Quero can still play, obviously, because he's a switch hitter. And maybe you're just not ready to fully see can Teel hit left-handed pitching because he's a lefty. But still, you want to get these guys in the order as many times for not only productivity, but again, get them as many developmental at-bats as possible. I mean, you're starting to see Quero now starting to want to drive the ball more instead of just make contact. So he needs more at-bats. He can't just stop his momentum and that type of stuff. And if you look at the stats right now, the White Sox have just 7 hitters with an OPS over 700, with Teel and Quero being among them. And the only reason why, Teel and Quero still haven't hit a decent 750 mark in terms of OPS is they've yet to unleash their slug potential. And I'm fine with that for the record, because again, as I know I can sound like a broken record to you everydayers, but there is so much for them to learn in terms of being a big league catcher that if they just want to focus on contact right now to still have productive at-bats, I'm fine with that. But as they progress, obviously you want to start to see them drive the ball more. And like I said, you're starting to see that with Quero. Teel a little bit too. And if you keep them in the lineup every day with one of them alternating, I think they'll start to grow more confident, in terms of using the power potential that they have. I mean, now do these guys have 30 to 35 home run potential like Colts Montgomery? No. But could they hit you 15 to 25 home runs this season? Yes. And you need that. And you would like them to hit more doubles. And I would like Edgar Carroll to hit better with runners in scoring position. Now, the one downside potentially for them being in the same lineup together is going to happen in that Chase Maedroth is going to be returning from the 10-day IL soon, and this is what Williams writes. But while the two young players are capable hitters, they're still getting used to the designated hitter spot while splitting catcher duties. Quote, it's a little tough, especially for me coming from the minor leagues, playing almost every day, Carroll said. Coming to Chicago, trying to find a spot to play more. It's really tough, but I have to make adjustments, and that's what I'm doing. Venable said both players have taken the DH role and while splitting catching duties. We're asking them to do something that they haven't done before in their careers, Venable said. To be able to stay locked in, to do all the work that they need to do with game planning, their relationships with their pitchers. There's plenty of work for them to do, and they're doing it, and it's been great. Whatever the opportunity they have, they're embracing it, end quote. Teel has a hit in 3 of his last 4 games and got a taste of DH role 17 times at AAA Charlotte. Teel views the role as a means to keep him and Quero fresh when he's in the lineup and Teel isn't sitting on the bench. And once Maedroth returns, the Sox would likely place him at second base because the team wants to give Curtis Mead a long leash at third base. But if Maedroth replaced Lenyn Sosa at second, the only position for Sosa, who's tied for the team lead in homers with 14, would be DH. The team has also to commit to the team also has to commit to giving Carroll and Teal the exposure to major league pitching to prepare them for next season. So the other problem too is Carroll's still got to get used to actually being a DH because since they're so resistant to playing Kyle Teel in the outfield, and he played it in college. So that's why it's not the end of the world if you did send him out to left at the major league level, because it's not like he's never, ever played it. But since they're so resistant, the only option that you have of having both of them in the lineup is one has to be at DH and one has to be a catcher. They should have given Edgar Quero some reps at DH at Charlotte when both of them were together. I always believed that was a missed opportunity. I think that they did kind of bungle not being bungled, not giving these guys at least some reps. I mean, Teel at least is more comfortable and seems like he's more apropos to DHing because he wants to stay active and that type of stuff. So he'll be in the cage, kind of those things to keep your mind off. Because again, being a DH, the biggest thing is it's mostly mental to be an effective DH, because if you have a bad at bat, you can't go to the field to forget about it. And yeah, you are sitting technically cold. And that's the other thing. Like, you can't be in the field to kind of run around to keep your body moving. You're basically cold for a couple of innings. Although with Maedroth coming back, I don't know if it's going to be as big of a problem, because I even said like maybe the compromise is because these guys are both catching. I know they're young, but there is still some physical toll. One of them should have a day off. Both of them should have a day off at least once a week. So basically, you're talking about them playing, let's cut it in half, 6 days a week. You could split 3 and 3. So then then you have one guy DH, that's 4, another guy DH, that's 5. So maybe you can do this 5 games, and then you just keep rotating Maedroth with Sosa and just have Sosa DH on the days that, on the day that you're resting Quero, having Teel catch, and then vice versa. That's 2 ways. And then, yeah, you're just going to have to rotate in. And when you give Vargas a day off, maybe you got to give him a day or Mead a day. It's just kind of a rotational thing. Or again, one way you could solve everything is do the next step. Embrace Teel being able to play the outfield. I mean, this is the time to experiment when wins and losses don't matter. And you already know Mike Tauchman's legs are getting tired. And you've even had to rest Andrew Benintendi as well. And you know what those guys can do. And they're not going to be on the next good team. Andrew Benintendi, hopefully he's only going to be here for another season. And then next year, after next offseason, hopefully you can trade him by eating some of his salary. So just a suggestion. Well, the White Sox have a league low 17 saves, but Bleacher Report Joel Reuter thinks Grant Taylor isn't the worst closer in baseball. And rightfully so, since the stuff is good. But let's discuss, is Taylor technically even someone that should be considered a closer? Let's discuss that after the break. Most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth. whether it's a 401k, property, or investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you end up leaving some money on the table. And that's why there's Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or your phone. Monarch does the heavy lifting for you. You can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. My wife loves using Monarch Money as it makes doing the budget just less stressful for her. I love it, because it was showing me where I was wasting money on things like subscriptions that I thought I had canceled. Turns out I was wrong. And, money was going down the toilet. And as my grandpa once said, it's not how much you make, it's how much you save. And Monarch Money is helping me save big time. Don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONMLB. Welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Again, shout out to all the everydayers. I appreciate your loyalty. Please hit the like button on today's episode and recommend to your fellow Sox fans or baseball fans friends to subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox, wherever they get their podcast, as this show is available on all major podcast platforms. One moment here. Sorry, I had to hit the cough button there for those watching on YouTube. All right, so just a reminder, my stance on Grant Taylor's development is, again, it comes down to his arm. If his arm can never handle being a starter, then I'm fine if he's nothing more than a high leverage reliever. I'm fine if he's a closer because, again, the next good team needs his stuff closing out games. And plus, remember, he was supposed to be a first-round pick had he not had Tommy John surgery. So in a lot of ways, he's a bonus. Probably not even supposed to be in your organization if he didn't have Tommy John, because I doubt he's falling to the first round. Guys who throw 100 miles an hour usually don't fall that far unless they just have wild control issues. And this is a guy that some thought was better than Paul Skeens at LSU. However, though, can he really technically be considered the 23rd best closer in baseball, as Bleacher Report's Joel Reuter ranks him? And it's not being a slam like, oh my gosh, I can't believe he ranked him so low. Look at his stuff. It's so vibrant. It's more Will Venable, I don't think really views the team needing a closer because how he views a bullpen being used. And I've talked about the concerns of him managing the bullpen, but the one thing I do agree with him is the modern thinking is you probably should not use your best relievers to get outs that might not even need to be, you need to get. Sometimes you want to use your best reliever to get the most important outs, and they don't always come in the ninth inning. Shocking, I know. Logic. Sometimes the most important out that you need to get comes in the seventh inning instead of the ninth. It's one of those things that, used to bother me about Tony La Russa when they had Craig Kimbrel and Liam Hendricks. He always kept on not wanting to use Craig Kimbrel and Liam Hendricks like Rick Hahn envisioned because he always had to save his closer for the ninth inning, even though it might not be a safe situation. I mean, that's just the biggest logic. You might not have a safe situation. You might go ahead by a few runs. Or again, you might be down by a few runs. And if had you gone to your best reliever, you could have limited the damage. So I get what he's doing. And while Taylor has 4 saves, I don't think Venable views him as a closer. I think he views him as his best reliever, and I need to use him at the spots where I need to get the biggest outs. Because he's thrown more innings in the 7th, 6 2/3, and in the 8th, 8 innings, than he has in the 9th. He's thrown just 6 1/3 innings. And also, ESPN.com's unofficial depth chart lists Jordan Leisure as the co-closer. So I get the assumption that Taylor is a closer since he has the stuff and he's been given 5 opportunities to close, but I don't think Will Venable views him as the official closer. I think he thinks it is closer by committee because he wants to use Grant Taylor when he needs to get the biggest outs. Although, please start using Grant Taylor maybe, because my boy Maverick, he gets into the comments and he's getting infuriated right now that Grant Taylor's innings are still low. But it's just one of those things where it's like, thanks for ranking them and considering them, but I don't think the White Sox have a closer because not of the stuff. It's just that's how Will Venable's viewing it. I think he's trying to figure out, hey, can I get a collection of guys that can get me high leverage outs? And that's what needs to be better. Because when it comes to the White Sox getting high leverage outs, they are the worst, one of the worst teams in baseball. I believe they're the worst. I know I did an episode that had them 30th. But what the rankings too got me thinking again is, okay, if you want this collection of guys that have like basically power arms for high leverage situations, excuse me one moment. I would love to see Peyton Pallette and Winkleman Gonzalez brought back, called up to the big leagues, because I want to see what a potential power arm bullpen group can be used in those high leverage situations. I don't want to see Brandon Eisert anymore in high leverage situations. I know what Brandon Eisert is. He's a nice, fine, lefty, sixth inning guy. He's a medium leverage guy at best. And I'm okay if you want to see if Jordan Leisure can also be like your backup closer. Because again, I think you do need, and this is also a good time to get these guys, and obviously the situations have to present themselves. But when they do, get these guys in the situations so that way they can handle it and they can grow into it. Because for Jordan Leisure, it's about being consistent. I mean, he's shown that maybe he can handle being a closer. He's got 4 saves, but he's got to be consistent. And right now in August, he's allowed just 1 run. But he's got to, for the bar that he has to clear to be kind of that, hey, maybe he's the 9th inning guy. And Grant Taylor, again, and that's the other thing I'd like to see, can Grant Taylor be your multi-inning closer? Because I think the best bullpens are the ones that have a multi-inning closer and a 9th inning closer. Because you still need to have a guy that has a mentality that I have no margin for error. And that's the other reason why it'd be great to also have Peyton Pallette, who's got experience closing, at least in the minors. And Winkleman Gonzalez, who he can make that ball dance to potentially get you an occasional save here and there. Get these guys used to it. This is, again, the time. Because wins and losses don't matter. Development does. Wins are just an added bonus. And I want to see Leisure clear that hurdle of, can you stop going on these spurts where you give up runs left and right, then throw some zeros, and then get lit up for like 3 runs? Just throw some zeros. Be this guy that you are in August. And then form a nucleus with Taylor, Gonzalez, and Pallette. And maybe I'm overrating Pallette. I think the front office is kind of quietly telling us, for those that are are Peyton truthers, that maybe are, because he's still not on the 40-man roster, and they need to put him on because he'll be Rule 5 eligible. And don't think for a second he won't be picked up. He can fire it. I know, like ESPN Kylie's McDaniel, he has him in his White Sox top 10 prospect list. So it's just one of those things where it's like, it would be nice to start seeing them give guys that they know that can be here long-term these opportunities to form a bullpen that Will Venable envisions. And that is guys that can get these high leverage outs when I need them to. And also maybe then that can help Will Venable, turn this trend around of him being a bad bullpen manager. Well, that wraps up this edition of Locked On White Sox. Thank you for making Locked On White Sox your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the all-new Locked On MLB Game Night. Every game, every night, all season long. Get local analysis on a national scale. Find MLB Game Night on Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. And I'll be back on Monday with another Minor League Monday report. Feel free to leave comments about today's discussion regarding dreading the White Sox going to the Kansas City this weekend, Venable embracing Kyle Teel and Edgar Carroll being in the same lineup, and whether Grant Taylor really should be considered a closer. You can leave them at the episode page on YouTube, X, formerly Twitter, at ToddJDub or at Locked On Sox, or you can email me at LockedOnWhiteSox@gmail.com. Have a great day. Have a great weekend. I'll see you Monday.